Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the course of Survey of Major English-Speaking Countries. This lecture is about the general introduction of Australia, Part 1. The continent of Australia lies between equatorial Southeast Asia and the Antarctic. With a coastline of 30,000 kilometers and a landing area of 7,682,300 square kilometers, it is the largest island in the world. It is also the smallest, flattest, and driest continent in the world. The country also includes Tasmania, an island just to the south, the Torres Strait Island off the northern coast of the mainland, and a small number of islands in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. This continent is thought to have formed from the disintegration of the great southern supercontinent in a process of separation occurring from 250 to 90 million years ago. Isolated from other major land masses, Australia's distinctive flora and fauna evolved through its long period as an island continent. Animals that are unique to the continent are easy to find. The platypus, often described as world's most unusual animal because of its looks. It is a small, web-footed, egg-laying mammal with a bill like a duck, and it can stay underwater for as long as 14 minutes. Platypuses are generally solitary, spending their lives either feeding along the bottoms of rivers, streams, and lakes, or resting in burrows dug into the banks. They are extremely energetic, feeding almost continuously while in the water. The kangaroo is a marsupial with large, powerful hind legs, large feet adapted for leaping, a long muscular tail for balance, and a small head. It is sometimes as 2 meters in height. It sits upright to its extremely powerful back legs and moves in jumping. It is a marsupial, which means that the young baby kangaroos lives in the mother's pouch until they are ready to defend for themselves. Commonly associated with Australia, they are the unofficial symbol for the country and appear as emblem of the Australian coat of arms and on some of its currency too. The koala is another marsupial, but one looks like a small, woolly, grey and white bear. It lives mainly in the branches of trees, especially the eucalyptus, whose leaves comprise the koala's main diet, although the koala is actually not a bear. English-speaking settlers from the late 18th century first called it koala bear due to its similarity in appearance to bears. Koala has a slow metabolism, sleeping for most of the day, about 16 to 18 hours a day. Koalas spend about 3 to their 5 active hours eating. Feeding occurs at any time of day, but usually at night. The landscape of the country is extremely variable. In the north are tropical rainforests. Snowfields occupy the plateau landscape of the southeast. In the center and the western areas of the continent, 2/3 of the land is desert or semi-desert. However, it is in the Mediterranean and temperate climates of the hills and the fertile plains bordering the east, south, and the southwest of the continent that more than 80% of the Australian people live today. Two of the country's most distinctive physical features are the Great Dividing Range and the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Dividing Range extends as an almost unbroken series of plateaux down the east coast of Australia, from northern Queensland through New South Wales and into Victoria offshore. The headwaters of a number of Australia's principal rivers are located in the Great Dividing Range. The Snowy River flows down the steep eastern slope, while the Darling and many other rivers drain the gentle western slope to join the Murray River. For tens of thousands of years prior to British colonization, the ranges were home to various Aboriginal Australian nations and clans. Evidence remains in some places of their traditional way of life, including decorated caves, campsites, and trails used to travel between the coastal and inland regions. Many descendants of these nations still exist today, and some remain the traditional owners and the custodians of their lands. The range was traversed in 1813 by Gregory Blaxland, W.C. Wentworth, and William Lawson. This initial reconnaissance marked by the beginning of European immigration, previously inhabited by the highlands, from the east coast into the Australian interior, or outback. The region is now important for agriculture, including grazing, mixed farming, fruit growing, lumbering, and mining. The rivers supply large irrigation and hydroelectric projects, while national parks and ski areas attract tourists. Especially popular is the Blue Mountain National Park. The Barrier Reef, the largest coral structure in the world, extends for over 2,000 kilometers along the coast of Queensland. As the world's most extensive coral reef ecosystem, the Great Barrier Reef is a globally outstanding and significant entity. Within the Great Barrier Reef, there are some 2,500 individual reefs of varying sizes and shapes, and over 900 islands. This diversity of species and habitats and their interconnectivity make the Great Barrier Reef one of the richest and most complex natural ecosystems on Earth. There are over 1,500 species of fish, about 400 species of coral, 4,000 species of mollusk, and some 240 species of birds. Plus, a great diversity of sponges, marine worms, and other species. No other World Heritage property contains such biodiversity. One of Australia's most remarkable natural gifts, the Great Barrier Reef, is blessed with the breathtaking beauty of the world's largest coral reef. The reef contains an abundance of marine life and literally hundreds of picturesque tropical islands, with some of the world's most beautiful golden beaches. Because of its natural beauty, the Great Barrier Reef has become one of the world's most sought-after tourist destinations. A visitor to the Great Barrier Reef can enjoy many experiences, including scuba diving, aircraft or helicopter tours, glass-bottomed boat viewing, cruise shipping tours, whale watching, and swimming with dolphins. As for the native people in Australia, We do not know exactly how long the country has been occupied, but the earliest discovered site of occupation is about 47,000 years old. To put this in perspective, since the first fleet arrived in 1788, there have been only 8 generations of settlers. On the other hand, there have been at least 18,500 generations of the people of the dreaming. The people of the dreaming belong to over 5,000 different groups of nations with different languages and cultures, but they are bound together by their beliefs in their dreaming. The dreaming, or the dream time, is the most enduring religion in Australia today. It is based on the central principle that the people who live on the continent have special responsibility to the land, that the land owns them, and they held it in trust as the home of their creator. However, in the immensely variable landscapes of the country, different cultures and different languages developed within the broad frameworks of the dream time. Australia's first people, known as the Aboriginal Australians, have lived on the continent for over 50,000 years. Today, there are 250 distinct language groups spread throughout Australia. Aboriginal Australians are split into 2 groups: Aboriginal peoples, who are related to those who already inhabited Australia when Britain began colonizing the island in 1788, and the Torres Strait Islander peoples, who descend from the residents of the Torres Strait Islands, a group of islands that is part of modern-day Queensland, Australia. Australia, the Aboriginal homeland, is Earth's driest and flattest continent. Only the eastern seaboard and the northern tropical forests get consistent rainfall. Hundreds of linguistically and culturally distinct Aboriginal tribes have lived in harmony with this harsh environment for thousands of years. Aborigines were traditionally nomads. Men hunted larger animals. Women hunted smaller ones and dug with sticks to unearth eggs, roots, and grubs. Women provided up to 80% of the staples and processes all the food. Traditional dwelling ranges from the round huts made with boughs to rocks and cave shelters. In the 20th century, the government has replaced many of these practical temporary shelters with European-style homes. There were somewhere between 200 to 250 different languages spoken on the continent. Some of these languages still exist today. About 20 of them are still strong, but over 150 are now lost. We do not know the names of all the languages that were spoken throughout the continent, but these are some of the languages groups who lived in the country's wide variety of landscapes and climates. When the British settlers began colonizing Australia in 1788, between 750,000 and 1.25 million Aboriginal Australians are estimated to have lived there. Soon, epidemics ravaged this island's indigenous people, and the British settlers seized Aboriginal lands. By the mid-1800s, the government practices of violence changed the policies of segregation and exclusion. The Aboriginal people were forcibly taken from their own land and put on reserves while they were placed under the absolute control of white officials who were given the title of protectors. Throughout the 19th century, Europeans, blustered by the image of themselves as the superior and a civilized people, colonized the whole continent of Australia. During the 19th and the 20th century, the social scientists adapted the general Darwinian theory of evolution to develop a theory of a hierarchy of races, with the white colonizing peoples located at the top, and the Aborigines, whom they colonized and exploited, at the bottom of the scale. In Australia, these racist theories legitimated further forms of exploitation and appropriation of land as the white settlers took over more of the country. Meanwhile, on the reserves, the people of the dreaming were denied basic rights and freedoms. By the beginning of the 20th century, the policy had been replaced by the policy of assimilation. The assimilation policy was founded on the belief that the white culture was the progressive and superior, whereas the Aboriginal culture was only a form of superstition. Children were taken away from families to destroy the culture of the local people and replace it with the white ones. As the children grew to adulthood, many of them had lost both their families and culture. They were employed as domestic servants or on cattle station, but were paid only with food and clothes, or with wages that were only a small fraction of those paid to white workers. In a word, the history of contract between the history of loss for the Aborigines of Australia, a history of stolen land, stolen culture, and a stolen of identities. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.